Welcome, everybody, back to the Fretboard Journal podcast. I'm your host, Jason Verlinde, the publisher of the Fretboard Journal magazine. Hopefully, you are subscribing to the Fretboard Journal's print magazine. If you are not, now is a great time to join us because our 59th issue is mailing to everybody straight from our printer. So I would love for you to see this issue. It's filled with, as always, 128 pages of great interviews and photo essays and content you're not going to find anywhere else. It's a labor of love. I've been at it for 20 plus years, and I would love for you to join us. Today's guest on the podcast is Lyle Brewer. Lyle is a professor of guitar at Berklee College, but there is so much more to his story than just that. He's got some solo albums that are absolutely beautiful. He's got some transcriptions on his website that you should all go check out. And I love his approach to guitar, which includes not only the tried and true electric hollow body guitars, but nylon string guitars, flat tops, you name it. He's one of those people like Julian Lage and Bill Frisell, where you can pretty much hand them anything with 6 strings and they're going to make it sound all their own. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation. For those of you listening on the East Coast, I know Lyle has some shows in May of 2026, so go check him out. Tell him the Fretboard Journal sent you. Also, check out our sponsors, Mike and Mike's Guitar Bar here in Seattle, Washington, one of my favorite guitar stores, as well as Peghead Nation, where you can learn to be a better guitarist. Whether you want to be a jazz player or a folk player or a bluegrass player, they've got you covered. You can have your first month free there with the discount code FRETBOARD. Our Fretboard Summit 2026 takes place August 20th to 22nd in Chicago at the Old Town School of Folk Music. This is my dream guitar weekend, and I would love to see you there. You do not need to be a player of any ability. You do not need to have a giant guitar collection to enjoy it. We try to make the programming as inclusive as humanly possible. And it's a great way to meet some of the people you've met on this show, including Josh Scott, the folks from Collings Guitars, and so many others. They'll all be there, and I would love to see you there as well. And now, without further delay, here is my conversation with Lyle Brewer. I'll include a link to all of his work in the show notes as well, so you can check out what he's up to. His music is fantastic. Lyle Brewer, welcome to the first official Fretboard Journal podcast mention. We did an article with you online, and I keep seeing, I'm following you on Instagram, and you keep teasing a new record. And so between that and you're wanting to hear your story, here we are.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you having me on, Jason. I've been working on a new album. I think this is my 13th solo album.
Wow.
I've been pretty busy over the last couple of years. But I've been putting a lot of thought and time and energy into this one. And, I've been kind of going back and forth between making records on electric guitar, and, I did a Christmas record recently on, steel string. And, when I bought a nylon string guitar maybe 10 years ago, and it's been kind of, it's been my closest friend and also kind of like the bane of my existence, because I've been really kind of putting myself under the microscope, trying to get as good a sound as I possibly can. And it's, I've taken classical guitar lessons and studied, jazz in the past, and I've kind of gone through the Chet Atkins, Tommy Emmanuel school, but I made I put a lot of effort into trying to get as good a sound on this album as I can, both in the guitars that I've been using and the place I've been recording, and also my right hand technique. So I'm really excited about this one.
Okay. I'm going to ask you more about it later, but you are no slouch. You mentioned taking guitar lessons. You are a professor of guitar at Berklee.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we got to hear how all that came to be, because for most people, Berklee is the ultimate to even attend, and you are teaching. So I know you grew up on the East Coast, right?
I grew up in a town about a half hour outside of Boston. I had an older brother who played, and he was a huge source of inspiration, and I ended up kind of chasing him around on the different instruments he played. So he started out playing drums, and I started playing drums, and then he moved to guitar, and Yeah, I ended up attending the New England Conservatory of Music, and I went through their jazz department, and like that was an awesome experience. And I definitely encountered some of like the greatest musicians that I'd ever heard. You know, I wasn't really I wasn't nearly as prepared as a lot of the other kids who were at the conservatory. That, you know, I was. You know, I could play, like In Memory of Elizabeth Reed, and I knew like a couple John Scofield songs. So I thought, yeah, I'll go to music and major in like jazz guitar. It seemed like a great idea at the time. And yeah, I've always just kind of like followed whatever I was interested in, you know. So, you know, when I discovered people like Bill Frisell, that got me into playing Telecaster, and I got really into roots music and country music. It was around that same time I got into like guys like Tommy Emmanuel and Chet Atkins, and I taught myself how to play a lot of those songs, like when I was in college.
Did your brother take this as far as you did? You were chasing him for a while.
No, but he's an astrophysicist, so he's doing fine.
Okay.
Yeah, he works on the he's a physics professor at Colorado State. He works on the atomic clock. So he basically he built a contraption that created the most accurate measurement of time that's ever been created.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so he's doing fine. And he plays like blues gigs on the weekend. I don't get it. So yeah, he's just one of like those guys. Whereas me, like, this is kind of all I have. So,
well, I mean, you're downplaying it, but how does one even become a professor at Berklee? Because I mean, is there an audition process just as there is to be a student?
Well, there are like a number of ways. You know, it's kind of interesting how it happened. Like, I was trying to raise money for an album, maybe in 2014, and at the at the time, you know, I was going through some, you know, like I was going through some pretty heavy personal stuff, you know, and I was trying to just make sure that I, you know, could afford to keep recording, and that was kind of like my safe haven, and I decided to make a bunch of guitar lessons and then like put them on the internet. You know, it was kind of like right around the time where people were, you know, uploading longer form videos to Facebook and YouTube and stuff. And I did this one where it was like 21 guitar lessons in 21 days. And yeah, like, you know, the only reason I did it was just to try to drum up some attention and try to get some pre-order activity for this album. But it turns out that I was friends with the head of the guitar department on Facebook at the time, and he watched all of them, you know, and you know, there were a variety of topics. There was some country string bending, there was some jazz playing and solo guitar stuff, and you know, without even really realizing it, you know, I was kind of already like auditioning to have the job. You know, it took about maybe 6 or 9 months of like, you know, trying to like knock on the door, you know, when they finally, well, you know, when the head of the department like agreed to meet me, you know, I thought he was just kind of, you know, we were going to get some coffee and that was going to be it. But they ended up offering me a job a couple of days later.
Wow. And when Berklee has a position, is it specialized, or you might be teaching Chet Atkins, you might be teaching Grant Green? Like, is it like all over the map, or did you have were you trying to fill a particular hole?
Yeah, I think at the time that there were a lot of students, and especially international students, who were really pursuing the Tommy Emmanuel thing. Yeah. You know, that really kind of exploded on the internet maybe 10 or 12, you know, years ago at this time. And yeah, it's kind of, even from a technical standpoint, it's kind of like it's a really specific technique, and it takes a lot of time to develop, you know. So, you know, all that time kind of spent like transcribing those tunes ended up really coming in handy. So it's that. And then, I teach a couple courses. I teach the class called Arranging for Solo Guitar, which is about how to write your own solo arrangements of songs. So we do, like a wide variety of tunes. We'll take like Beatles songs or jazz standards or pop tunes. And then, yes, it depends on who signs up to take lessons with you. And when kids come into Berklee, the department tries to pair them up with someone who is qualified to teach the specific style that they want to do.
Okay.
Yeah. So I might teach a jazz standard 1 hour, and then the next hour I'm teaching the kids Sultans of Swing, and then the next minute we're playing like a Chet Atkins kind of tune.
Okay.
Yeah. Which is what makes it exciting, and it also makes it the challenge, the fun parts are really like the challenge.
Yeah. And obviously a young student going to Berklee hasn't been exposed to all the music that you have, but how much is it a two-way street where they're saying, I'm really inspired by Blake Mills or McGee or something, like teach me how to do that. Like, are you getting wind of music that wouldn't have been on your radar?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can start to kind of see certain, you can trace, you can kind of trace the patterns of who's popular and what like kids are into. Mm-hmm. My friend, Charlie Allen, Charlie became pretty well known on the internet, maybe around 2020, 2021. So it's happened. A lot of kids come in who wanted to sound like him. Obviously like the Blake Mills thing is huge, and I've found that, it's just, it keeps me constantly trying to check out, who the younger guitar players are, it's forced me to kind of, I have to learn how to, I had to learn how to play slide, like I can, try to play slide a little bit, some kids come in and they say, hey, I want to do this thing, like in an open tuning. I go, oh, well, I don't really do that very often, but I need to understand it enough to be able to communicate this idea to you.
Taking the syllabus out of the equation, what is inspiring you right now? What are you really listening to?
Ooh, what am I listening to? I've been going back to a bunch of music that I listened to in high school. I've been, there's a Pat Metheny record that I've been really into. The duo album that he did with Jim Hall. Yeah. Jim Hall and Pat Metheny, been really into that. The Pat Metheny group, the record from, I think it's about 2004. I kind of think it's called Speaking of Now. He plays amazingly on that. I've been really into this songwriter from Canada. His name's Andy Shauf. Mm-hmm. SH. Yeah. And I found that I found him to be super inspiring from a songwriting perspective. A lot of my original music is, it's, I've made a pretty concerted effort to have it not be, to not have it feel like a guitar clinic.
Yeah.
And I find that I end up kind of having similar taste to Andy Shauf's music. So I was actually on this new album I've been working on of kind of taking a few, I've taken some of my musical cues from him, and I've been experimenting with some of the ideas and the themes that he uses in his music.
That's super cool. I mean, when I think of Andy, and he was in our magazine a little while ago, I think of almost the pop orchestration behind him. It's sort of this big pop sound. So how does that translate to what you're doing? Are you trying to add instruments to it and everything, or just more on the arrangements?
I think it more comes from trying to be really direct and specific about the choices that you make, and trying to write things that are kind of strong melodically and harmonically, to the point where trying to their structure is well put together, rather than like a dynamite like performance or whatever. I guess like there are certain arranging like techniques that I found to be like very helpful. Whether it's like repeating phrases, having kind of having like simple and subtle but very specific like chord substitutions as well. Something I noticed that he was doing that I really like is, he'll use notes that are outside of the major scale, or that are outside of like the diatonic harmony, but he does it in a way there it doesn't like, he's not like beating you over the head with it. And a lot of those things are like, it's almost like an illusion where like, he might use something like a flat third or a flat nine, but he's not kind of drawing a lot of attention to it. It's just this kind of like general slick chromaticism. And I ended up having a pretty good time experimenting with some of that stuff in my own music. And it wasn't really a subconscious thing. I just found myself like listening to his albums a lot, and it seemed to kind of just like come out organically.
See, this is the difference between a professor at Berklee listening to Andy Shauf and myself. You're hearing all the things and like incorporating it into instrumental jazz, which is super cool.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I think like one of the dangers about like learning all the rules and trying to kind of expand your whatever harmonic or melodic like bag is that you can take it to the extreme where you're writing music that's only for other jazz musicians, and what I try to do is it almost seems like your musical skills are like it's like you're going through like Star Wars Jedi training, right? And then at the end of your Jedi training, they say, okay, do you want a red one or a green one? They usually say, are you going to use this to have everything be really extreme and over the top and borderline obnoxious, or are you going to use these skills to just try to be able to influence your own music and have those little kind of creative turns in your songs, rather than just writing the most complicated music that's ever happened, and a lot of my favorite players, like Pat Metheny and Bill Frisell, and especially guys like Wes Montgomery, even if Wes is playing something that's incredibly sophisticated and incredibly harmonically complicated, it still kind of sounds like he's just like playing a blues.
Yeah. And
he's got like a big old smile on his face, and it feels great in the time. So like you don't hear this complexity, you just hear the music at the end of it. So trying to like kind of like learn all those things that I studied in trying to play jazz, and then using them in my songwriting has been an interesting process.
I imagine you're also having this conversation with your students, many of whom are playing at an incredibly high technical level, but maybe aren't making music for, I won't even say the masses, but for a larger audience beyond fellow instrumentalists.
Yeah, that's a real challenge. It's easy to get caught up in being goal oriented, and that, well, if I just do all these things, then I'm gonna like win. I'm gonna win the game of playing music, and And like, to do anything really well artistically, I think you have to try really hard. But then at the end, you have to say, okay, well, is all my effort actually making the music as good as it can?
Yeah.
It can be. And that's always been an interesting thing to kind of like examine about music. You can hear whatever. I can hear an Elliott Smith song and maybe it's just playing power chords or just 2-note chords. And you can hear, he's got great lyrics. The melodies are fantastic. The harmony is really sophisticated. The arrangements are really well put together. And yeah, I think with some of my original music, I try to like play the game of having as much musical impact as possible with having the amount of ingredients like not be as much as you might think.
Yeah, that's super cool.
Yeah,
you're in terms of talking about music and accessibility and an audience, like you are so good on your Instagram of showing the work, not only promoting the album or the show, but also here's a tune that I'm working on that's going to be in a little while come out. You've been doing that with the new record, which is why we're talking. Talk to me a little bit about your process there. Are you just excited to share everything with everyone?
I think that I do the best when I'm talking to people about what it is that I'm doing. I think there is like I think there's like a mental health aspect to it where I think it may be in my early 20s. Part of the like jazz education, I think, is like you hang out by yourself and you practice, and you're never as good as you could be. Mm. And I think that kind of releasing videos of me playing my original music, I feel like it does a couple things. One, it kind of forces me to be okay with where I'm at. And I think that has kind of paid off and has given me a bit of perspective about the way I sound. It's like sometimes my default is that like I don't sound good, or I'm not ready, or I'm not good enough. And I think using the internet to express myself has been a pretty therapeutic thing. Obviously you have to be careful,
I was going to say,
it's not usually where people go to solve their health problems, like their mental health issues.
Exactly.
But I think that it's, I think I got to a certain point where I just realized like, I want to play the way I want to play, and I want to be myself, and I want to feel good about playing guitar. And I think that it's kind of forced me to like let go of certain things. And I think it's kind of in keeping with choosing to release a good amount of music. As I said before, this is my 13th album. And I just find that feels more. I just think that feels better to me than agonizing for years and years and thinking that it's not ready and then it's not good enough. I just I like to work hard and I like to put my stuff out there and yeah, and it's also it's what I would be doing anyway. I spend so much time by myself practicing or writing songs, and some of my music, like, it doesn't take a month to write a song. It takes an hour sometimes. And I think presenting it as such has kind of made me feel I don't know. It seems to help me. It seems to help me want to stay in the game.
Yeah. How often or how much time usually do you allow for things to percolate? Of like, I wrote a song in an hour, I'm going to post a little bit of it on the internet. Do you let it sit for a while, or do you sometimes get so excited it's like, I'm just going to share this thing with the world?
I think I have a pretty good sense of when something is or from like a compositional standpoint, I think I have a pretty good idea of when something is all done. It kind of seems like, it sometimes feels like you're like, you have a key that you think is going to open the door, and you keep shaping it and you keep trying it. And then when it finally opens, like it feels a lot different, when everything falls into place. I can usually tell. And I think that's just come from experience,
Yeah.
Yeah, there are certain songs that take an hour, and there's other songs where, to be like 90% of the way done, and I'll have to like listen to it for a couple days, and then, or like a couple weeks, and then all of a sudden it'll make sense. So yeah, if you I have probably thousands of voice recordings, and a lot of those have my kids like, screaming at the top of their lungs in the background. So I feel like I've gotten like pretty good at that. So
That's great. You could do the Mac DeMarco thing and just release all, 300 of them at once.
Oh my goodness.
All the snippets.
Dude, yeah, I have a lot. Yeah, man. Yeah. It depends, it's, I also feel like, in order to get it to the point where I want to present it, it helps me kind of, it helps me stay on track. If I have a song that's like 90% of the way done, I just need to end it. I will sit there and make sure I get the song done, and then have a recording, and then like that's it. It seems to kind of like help me. It seems to like help like the workflow, I think.
That's cool.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit when we first were chatting about your different guitars, and I've seen you play nylon-string, like you said, your friend and your nemesis. I've seen you play jazz boxes. I've seen you play flat tops. Like talking about, I don't know, you didn't use the word imposter syndrome, but self-doubt. Is this good? Posting stuff on the internet for mental health. Is there one style of guitar where you feel more confident than the others, or where you just kind of like, I got this?
As far as
just like more of a natural extension of what you're about. Maybe you're trying to play nylon string because it is out of your comfort zone, but is there one instrument that kind of, it's like, oh, this is the old shoe that fits perfectly?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think I probably get the most enjoyment out of playing jazz. I probably like a jazz box without an amp. Because I feel like to me that feels like, to me that feels like an old friend, and I spent so much time, playing guitars with like heavy flat-wound strings, and a lot of times it would just be whatever, like in my dorm room or, like in a practice room. And, so much like discovery and examination and, and so much like joy like came from that, as much as I love playing Telecaster, I always feel like all my favorite Telecaster players are like on my shoulders or whatever, and they're kind of like making sure that I bend in tune, and with classical guitar, it's been a really great journey to to play that music as well. I feel like arranging songs or playing my own music on a jazz box, it feels like that's where I'm supposed to be. And it's interesting. I have a couple old like Gibsons, and I just bought a 65 Epiphone Granada, and it's probably the least practical instrument I have, and I love playing it so much, I bought it maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 months ago, and I wrote like 10 songs on it in like 3 weeks. Cause it's just like, I would just sit and play, and I just, just on my couch, it felt so comfortable and natural, so I think probably, an old Gibson archtop with flat ones on it It's probably where I feel the most at home.
Did that Epiphone replace something, or you just needed to add it to the stable?
Well, need is like a relative term, so I'm not really sure I could. I'm not really sure I could use that word per se, but I sometimes will just make gear purchases just because I want to. It's some of them are strictly just for inspiration, and they're not the most practical. But yeah, it's interesting with the 60s Epiphones. You can get these really cool, vintage guitars that are like, to me, they kind of seem, they're not really jazz boxes and they're not really surf guitars either. They're like somewhere in the middle. Like it's got like the big gaudy plastic pickguard, and it's got the single coil pickup, and it's noisy, and it's like it doesn't play in tune great, but it's got all this character, and I feel like that's kind of what I'm after more than like the perfect sounding guitar. I just want something that like gives me ideas.
Yeah. How many, what we would call just, and I'm assuming all of them have probably a pickup in them, but like how many different arch tops do you have right now?
1, 2, 3. I guess I have 3 old ones and then a new one.
Okay.
I have a 330, a 62 330 that my parents got me for when I graduated high school. And at the time, it wasn't nearly as expensive as they are now. And I played that all through college. And then I have a 125, but it's the 125 TDC. So interesting about the Gibson 125s from the 60s is they made some that are thin, some that are as thick as a 175, some with 2 P90s, some with no cutaway, some with a cutaway. So this one is basically a 175 for like a fraction of the money. And then I have an Epiphone Granada, and then I have like an Eastman. I have an Eastman. I think it's a T4. It's like the 339 version. And I use that mostly for like playing out, because it's there's no feedback. It's super reliable. It's, and all my old guitars that probably shouldn't be like taken out anymore, they just like stay at home.
That's interesting, because then for the sake of doing a record like this new record, for example, like in a studio, you can do some noise reduction and make those pickups seem a little quieter, and you can fidget with it a little more than you could if you're playing in front of a bunch of people. Do you bring out the vintage ones for those for recording sessions?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh yeah. The 125 that I use that on my record, Get It Together, which came out in 2019. And even during that session, it kind of felt like it would like behave for a song or two, and then I would have to like retune it, or just we'd have to reposition the cape or whatever. And yeah, on this new one, I'm playing it on nylon string, and I use this 1977 Kono classical. Kono was a very well respected Japanese classical guitar company. And then I use and then when I play like nylon gigs, I just use I got this like Takamine nylon electric that doesn't feed back. It sounds great. It was like meant to be amplified, so you can use it with it's like it makes more sense in a live situation. If I were playing like concert halls and I had I wasn't playing like clubs and bars and stuff, then it would probably like make more sense to put some kind of pickup system in the old Kono. But yeah, just kind of trying to be practical about all those things.
Totally. I'm glad to hear they all kind of cycle through and get into the rotation.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's fun. I like to I never want to feel like I got, whatever. I practiced a bunch of telly licks, so I have to play telly, or I play a hollow body And I like to bend strings sometimes. So I got to make sure that the string gauge is so that I can bend strings if I want to, but also, and it's like, I've kind of tried to, I've tried to just like be okay with having a couple different interests and yeah.
And the record that we've been kind of hinting at for a while, you keep saying coming soon. When is it actually coming out?
Probably in the fall.
In the fall.
I'm still tracking, and we need to get album artwork and all that stuff together. But yeah, I don't have an exact release date. I am doing a couple of shows in the Northeast soon, so I guess I'll have to wait till the next time I can play in the Northeast, which will probably be in September or October.
Where are you? When are the gigs?
I'm playing. Let me just check. Let me just check my phone to make sure, because as we were saying earlier, I made a poster with the wrong dates on them. So let me see. I'm playing this place in Exeter, New Hampshire, like the Word Barn. That's May 8th. And I'm playing at my favorite place, this great venue in Cambridge and Harvard Square called Clip-Esseem.
Mm-hmm.
That's the next day, Saturday, May 9th. May 15th at the Parlor Room, and then May 16th up in Burlington, Vermont. So yeah, I got some shows coming up.
Everybody loves that Clip-Esseem. Why does everybody love it? I hear about it so much.
Well, it's really about the people, the people who run that venue are the most like wonderful, supportive, music supporting team that you could possibly imagine. They treat their performers incredibly well. They do a phenomenal job of curating an audience that wants to show up and have like a quiet listening experience. It's small enough where, as an upcoming artist, you could have an opportunity to open for people. I think the cap is like 100 people. So it's a little bit hard. It's a little bit hard to find spaces where you could play the kind of stuff that I want to play. Solo guitar, it kind of ends up being like a bad background. You can get gigs, but they end up kind of becoming de facto background music gigs. What's been really great about them too is if you have they will encourage and support people who are early on in their career. And I think as people develop and they have options to play larger rooms, I think you don't forget when you weren't quite ready and someone gave you a chance anyway. And I think that really means a lot. I did my first ever solo guitar thing there, maybe in my early 20s. They run this thing every year called like the Campfire Fest, and it's 3 or 4 days over for like Memorial Day weekend, and everyone gets 15-minute slots. And even if you can't get a gig there during the year, like they always say, if you want to come and do Campfire, you're more than welcome. So they were the only place that really gave me a shot. And then when I put out my first solo guitar album, they let me have the release show there. I've had maybe 3 or 4 different albums come out like at that venue. And they they're just incredibly enthusiastic, wonderful people. And the people who come to shows there are like the exact same way.
I love it.
Yeah, man, it's great. It's great.
Learning Curve's not going to be out till fall, but you just released a single. It's really recently, I think. Do you want to talk about it? You were just a kid?
Oh yeah. So that was like a remix of a song that was on my Get It Like Together record. And me and my audio engineer were talking about adding a little like different sound to that one. That was like, that's been, I think, the only song that I've released to like hit 1 million like hit 1 million streams. And yeah, we've been experimenting with I did a couple singles during COVID, and some of the stuff on the Get It Together record, it would be, the song would be, we like took a couple of the songs and we gave it some different audio treatment. A couple of the tunes on the record had like really long fade outs or fade ins or something. So we just kind of, spliced them up and gave them a different sound, and put those out online.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I noticed the album colors have like blue, pink. You flipped it.
Yeah. That was that was a recommendation of my, of the guy like Chris Di Lorenzo, who has done the album art from all my records. Yeah, just trying to come up with ideas and playing the whole Spotify streaming game, which is interesting. It's like I can't figure out if it's I mean, I know it's not all good. I don't know if it's all evil either. I don't know. There's I've been able to get a certain amount of traction on there, and a lot of those people end up coming out to shows, or they'll go on my merch store and buy transcriptions of songs, or they'll buy vinyl. So I'm not really exactly sure how to see it. In some ways, I think it's kind of like the way the radio used to be. Although the kind of expansion of AI music has kind of got me freaked out about it, but I don't know what to think anymore.
Yeah. The lines between evil and okay are very blurry right now. What's Berklee's take on AI generated music? I mean, I'm sure that's coming up.
Yeah. What's their take on AI generated music? I don't really know. I think that I would imagine, like any other large institution, they're trying to handle it the best they can. I don't really know what's going to happen with it. There's a part of me that thinks that seeing someone play a musical instrument in a live situation is always going to be interesting, and there's always going to be an appeal for it. It's been happening for so long, and obviously, as we experienced during COVID, it's like people want to be together, having a joint experience. I think where it gets really tricky is that the technology is getting so good that, I'm not thinking of this as some like distant future problem. Like, talking about Spotify already, like I'm already competing with AI generated music, and sometimes whatever, you go on an instrumental playlist and you go like, oh, that sounds pretty good. I wonder who this person is. You can't find them.
Sure.
So I stopped myself, but like I could go on there and say, make me a song that sounds like me.
Yeah.
And I don't do it because I'm wary of how good I shouldn't say how good, of how closely it would be able to resemble something that I do.
Yeah.
There's also a part of me that's like, this whole game is kind of an against all odds for the love of the game. There are a lot more reasons why it's probably not going to work out than it will, but that still hasn't like deterred me into doing anything else. So I kind of feel like at this point, I'm just like, well, I'm going to keep doing this. I don't know what, I mean, I've gone through all this so far. Like, I'm not going to be like, oh, this is art. Oh, okay, cool. I'm going to go work at a bank because I thought this was easy. Like that's the exact opposite. So
do you have students at this point who are using, maybe they are a loner woodshedding constantly in their bedroom? Do you have people who are like, well, I played guitar, but my jazz trio 2/3 was AI? Like, do you have that happening yet?
I don't have that. Well, it's interesting. I end up seeing that a lot more with my older musician friends or with like musician acquaintances who might write a song and then they'll use whatever the AI program is to like fill it out and then they'll share it.
Okay.
I don't really see, I haven't at least had any conversations with young people about it. All the people I know who are using AI music are like my age or older, which is kind of interesting, and it's the same way that, people my age will like yell at kids about being on their phones, but like they're on their phones all the time too. So
yeah,
I don't know if it's really a generational thing. I think that, I don't know. We'll see where it all goes. I don't know. I obviously care, but there's not too much I can do except like yell about it on the internet. And I'd rather just play my guitar,
which you do exceptionally well. Let's just say that again.
Oh man, I appreciate it.
Lyle, it's always a joy talking to you. I'll include links to the shows you kind of mentioned. So if anyone on the East Coast is listening to this or Northeast, they'll know, and obviously keep us posted on Learning Curves so we can share it with the world when it's ready.
All right, I definitely will, Jason. I appreciate your time, man. I'm a huge fan of the podcast and the magazine, and I don't know, man. I'm really psyched that we were like able to get together.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad, and we chatted about a bunch and it was all fascinating. So I encourage everybody to go check out your first 12 albums. 13's on the way.
Yeah. You have to, I was joking the other day that everyone knows you have to get your first 12 albums out of the way, and then it really starts to it really starts to come together after that.
Exactly. It's like not a sophomore slump. It's the first dozen slump or something. Yeah. It's.
I mean, I still really enjoy this, man. I love going to the studios. I love playing guitar. I love writing. I love recording. And it's like, and I don't know, maybe I've kind of hit a sweet spot where it's like, I don't know, I've kind of figured out what works for me. It was a lot of trial and error and like some trial and a lot of error, but yeah, I feel like I'm in a good spot with this one.
I love it. Thanks so much, Lyle.
All right, Jason, talk to you soon, man.
All right, that was my conversation with Lyle Brewer. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks as always for tuning into the Fretboard Journal podcast. I know we've had a bunch of episodes lately. The fun never stops. So subscribe to our podcast feed if you haven't yet, and by all means, share these episodes with your friends.